History is full of long, drawn-out wars, conflicts that stretch on for years, sometimes even decades, shaping the destinies of nations and leaving deep marks on the world. We often think of war as a slow, grinding affair, with endless battles and negotiations. But the Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896 stands out for a very different reason. It holds the record for being the shortest war in recorded history, lasting just 38 minutes from start to finish. Blink, and you might have missed it. That's less time than it takes to brew a proper cup of tea, or to watch a single episode of your favorite sitcom. Imagine a war beginning and ending before your kettle even whistles. In fact, it was less a war, and more a one-sided, violent disagreement, over so quickly that most people in Zanzibar probably hadn't even finished their morning tea before it was all over. The city would have barely stirred from its slumber. The paperwork, the official reports, and the diplomatic cables sent back and forth likely took far longer to process than the actual fighting itself. Bureaucracy, as always, moves at its own pace. On the morning of August 27, 1896, the British Empire, displeased with Zanzibar's new sultan, decided to make its position unmistakably clear. They responded with overwhelming force, assembling warships and troops in the harbour, ready to act. Zanzibar, often called the Spice Islands, was a vibrant trade hub, famous for its cloves and bustling markets. Though the sultans ruled in name, the island was under British protection, which really meant Britain pulled the strings behind the scenes. This arrangement worked smoothly, as long as the Sultan followed British wishes and didn't rock the boat. The illusion of local rule was maintained, but real power rested with the British officials. But
starting a war and losing it before your tea gets cold. The Anglo-Zanzibar War lasted just 38 minutes. Yes, minutes. Gunboats, bad decisions, and a palace in flames. Stay with me, this is history.
As history so often reminds us, there's always someone willing to challenge the status quo, someone who refuses to follow the script laid out for them. In this case, a new sultan seized the throne without seeking British approval, defying the empire's authority and setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation. And that, my friends, is where our story truly begins. A tale of pride, power, and the fastest war in history. Scene transition. The trouble began with the sudden, suspicious death of pro-British Sultan Hamad bin Thuwaini. The British wanted their chosen successor, Hamoud bin Mohammed, on the throne. But Khalid bin Bargash, the late Sultan's cousin, had other plans. He seized the palace and declared himself Sultan without British approval. This was a direct violation of the treaty with Britain. The British consul, Basil Cave, demanded Khalid step down immediately. Khalid refused, believing he had a rightful claim and enough support to hold the palace. The British saw this as an intolerable challenge to their authority. London's response: remove Khalid by force if necessary. The stage was set for a showdown. Basil Cave issued an ultimatum. Khalid must surrender by 9 a.m. on August 27th or face bombardment. British warships lined up in the harbour, guns aimed at the palace. Khalid, undeterred, refused to back down. He had about 2,800 men, mostly palace guards and civilians, plus a single royal yacht armed with a few small cannons. The British, meanwhile, had 5 modern warships and nearly 1,000 marines and sailors. As the deadline approached, tension filled the air. A self-declared sultan in a wooden palace versus the world's most powerful navy. Khalid hoped the British would hesitate. He was wrong. The clock ticked toward 9. The standoff was about to explode. At precisely 9:02 a.m., the British Royal Navy opened fire on the Sultan's palace, marking the beginning of what would become the shortest war in recorded history. The thunderous roar of cannons echoed across the harbour, shattering the morning calm and signalling the start of a brutal bombardment. The palace, once a symbol of royal power and grandeur, was quickly reduced to rubble under the relentless barrage. Walls crumbled, towers collapsed, and thick clouds of smoke billowed into the sky as the British guns showed no mercy. Khalid's defenders tried desperately to return fire with their outdated cannons, but their shots fell harmlessly into the sea, unable to reach the powerful British ships anchored just offshore. The royal yacht Glasgow, the pride of the Sultan's fleet, attempted to join the fight, but it was no match for the British firepower and was sunk within minutes, disappearing beneath the waves as the battle raged on. The Zanzibari forces, outgunned and outnumbered, were quickly overwhelmed. The so-called battle was more a demolition than a true fight, as British shells tore through the defenders' positions with devastating efficiency. By 9:40 a.m., just 38 minutes after the first shot was fired, the bombardment ceased. The smoke began to clear, revealing the full extent of the destruction. The palace was in ruins. The Sultan's flag had been torn down, and Khalid's supporters were scattered, fleeing the devastation in all directions. Khalid himself managed to escape through a back door amidst the chaos, slipping away through the palace gardens and seeking refuge at the German consulate, hoping for protection from the British. The German diplomats granted him asylum, and under the cover of darkness, they smuggled him out of Zanzibar by boat, eventually helping him reach the safety of mainland Africa. In total, the entire war had lasted just 38 minutes, a flurry of violence and destruction compressed into less than an hour. The shortest war in history was over, leaving behind a devastated palace, a toppled regime, and a new chapter in the colonial history of Zanzibar. Scene transition. With the palace in ruins, British Marines quickly secured control of Zanzibar, their boots echoing through the shattered halls. The once grand seat of power was now little more than rubble, a stark reminder of the cost of defiance. Remarkably, the British suffered only one minor injury, a testament to their overwhelming firepower and preparation. In contrast, the Zanzibari side endured devastating losses, with around 500 lives lost in a matter of minutes. The streets were filled with grief and disbelief as families mourned their loved ones. Wasting no time, the British installed their chosen sultan, Hamoud bin Mohammed. Under British pressure, he promptly abolished slavery, a move that would reshape the island's social fabric. Yet this act was less about justice and more about consolidating British influence. Adding insult to injury, Zanzibar was forced to pay reparations, not just for the damage, but for the very shells and coal the British used to destroy its own palace. The paperwork was a bitter reminder of who now held the power. The message to the empire was unmistakable. Any act of defiance would be crushed, swiftly and without mercy. The Union Jack fluttered over Zanzibar, a symbol of dominance and a warning to all who might resist. The Anglo-Zanzibar War, though brief, became a chilling symbol of colonial power's overwhelming force. The might of the British Empire was on full display, leaving no doubt about who ruled the seas and the land. In truth, it wasn't a war. It was an execution. The outcome had been decided before the first shot was fired, and the consequences were swift and merciless. The ruins of the palace stood as a grim warning to others, a silent testament to the fate awaiting those who dared to challenge imperial rule. The absurdity of the war's length, just 38 minutes, might invite a dark chuckle, but its brutality and the suffering it caused cast a long, unshakable shadow over Zanzibar's history. Even the shortest wars can leave the deepest scars, their echoes lingering for generations in the hearts and memories of those who survive.